Grab yourself a coffee and pull up a seat because today I'm teaching you how to play Boom Patrol from Smirk and Dagger Games. I'm Mark Maya and this is Board Game Coffee.
Vincent, get back here this instant! Oh.
Thank you. Oh, I love you too. I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you. Thank you.
Before we get started, you should know that the components used in this video are from the prototype version of the game and do not necessarily represent the final look of the product. With that said, let's get back to the table. Boom Patrol is a tank combat arena-style player versus player action programming game that plays 2 to 4 players. Now, for those of you who are new to the idea of programming actions as a game mechanic, it's simple. Each player will get a command deck consisting of 7 different cards that will dictate the actions your tank can perform in the battle arena. Players will then secretly place 3 of those command cards face down in front of them. Then, one by one, players will take turns revealing these cards and apply the depicted action to their tank. In this video, I'll teach you how to set up for a 3-player game of Boom Patrol. If you're looking to play a 2-player game, there are a few minor tweaks to the rules that I'll go over at the end of this video. As far as a 4-player game goes, the only difference is in the setup, and we'll cover that when we come to it. Being that Boom Patrol is a tank game, the first thing we need to do is assemble those tanks. To build your tank, take the following pieces in your chosen color, as shown here, and stack them on top of each other, making sure that the holes in the middle line up. Then take these 2 button-like things and use them to hold your tank together like this. And there you have it, your very own tank with rotatable turret. Ooh. Unlike many other board games, Boom Patrol doesn't actually have a board, but it does have these corner pieces that we'll use to frame out the battle arena. To do this, simply take the 2 range rulers that came in the box and lay them out end to end. Then place a rally point corner at either end like this. Do the same for the other corner pieces until you have a square in the center of your table framed by these rally points. This is your battle arena. The rulers we used can be set aside for now. But don't put them away, we'll need them again as soon as we start playing. Next, take the clock tower disc and place it in the center of the arena. Don't worry if it's not perfect, close enough will do. Now, each player should choose a color and take the matching player board, tank, and 9 cards with the same colored backs. Then, place them outside the battle arena beside one of the rally points, preferably the one closest to you. Place the backside of your tank flush up against the inside edge of the rally point so that your tank is now inside the perimeter of the battle arena. You can start your tank anywhere along this edge, making sure that none of it extends past these points. At the start, your tank's turret can be aimed in any direction you like, as long as it's positioned between any 2 of these hash marks. Personally, I like to start off with a straightforward approach. In a 3-player game, 2 players will start with their tanks on adjacent rally points, like so. The 3rd player starts with their tank along the opposite edge of the battle arena, making sure that their tank is equidistant from both neighboring rally points. So at this point, your setup should look something like this. But if you're playing a 4-player game, your setup would look like this, with each tank on its own rally point. And that's the only difference in a 4-player game. Once your tanks are in place, each player should take 1 white glory cube and place it in the 0 slot of their glory points track. Among the 9 cards in your color, you'll find 2 of these Rattled cards. Set them aside face up, but keep them close. You'll need them later. Alright, next we need to select a captain. Now, you can do this in 2 ways. You can either choose your favorite or hand them out randomly. Once you've selected your tank captain, place them near your player board. Oh, and make sure to leave enough room next to your command deck for 3 cards. This is where you'll place your command cards. Now, we're not placing anything there yet, but we will. Next thing we need to do is create the initiative deck. take these 3 cards entitled Total Carnage Round, shuffle them together, and place them face down. No peeking. Then take a tank card for each color tank being played, shuffle them together, and place them face down on top of the stack of Total Carnage Round cards. Now take all those cards and place them somewhere face down near the battle arena. Any remaining tank cards can be placed back in the box. You won't be needing them this game. Next, shuffle the gear cards and place them face down somewhere within reach. You'll also want to place your 6 Wreckage cards, the Boom card, as well as the Hold Up template nearby. Sort all the token types and keep them next to the board to form the supply. The last thing we need to do before we play is populate the battle arena with these structures, which we will then demolish for gold, gear, and other surprises. Shuffle all the building tiles face down and stack them into equal piles. And when I say equal piles, I mean equal-ish. Get as close as you can. Then hand out 1 pile to each player. And in case I didn't mention it already, the tiles need to stay face down. No peeking. Players will then take turns placing the building tiles face down, one at a time, into the battle arena. When the last tile has been placed, you'll be left with something that looks like this. When placing tiles, you're free to place them anywhere in the battle arena, as long as you follow these 3 rules. Rule number 1. Tiles cannot be placed outside the battle arena. Rule number 2. Tiles do not have to conform to a grid and can be placed in any orientation. Not exactly sure if that counts as a rule. And lastly, rule number 3. All tiles must be placed approximately 1 tile's width away from any other tile or object. It doesn't have to be perfect, just close enough. This is good, and so is this. But this is too close. Lastly, gather 2 white combat dice and keep them within easy reach of all players. The purple die can be set aside for now. We won't be needing it until later in the game. Alright, we are now set up and ready to play. Now, before we start, I'd like to point out that this will not be a game of 100% precision, so if you can accept that, then you're in for an explosively good time. Boom Patrol is played over a series of rounds. If a player collects 6 or more medals after all the regulation rounds have completed, they win. Now, if there's a tie or no one collects at least 6 medals, players will move on to the Total Carnage round. Think of it as going into overtime. And at the end of said overtime, the player with the most medals wins. Well, assuming you have at least 6. You need a minimum of 6 to win. Boom Patrol's order of play consists of a battle plan phase, a combat phase, and lastly, an end phase. Let's go over how each of those phases work, starting with the battle plan phase. The first thing that everyone does during the battle plan phase is program their command cards, and this is done simultaneously. From their own set of 7 command cards, all players secretly choose 3 cards and place them face down in a row in front of them. This is your command row. Keep in mind that these command cards will resolve from left to right, so plan accordingly. When you're done programming your command cards, announce it out loud. Done!
I'm right here.
Maybe not that loud. Once all players have completed programming their cards, reveal the top card of the initiative deck to determine who goes first. The player whose tank card was revealed will be the first to play this round. If this was a Total Carnage round, the first player would be determined by the conditions printed on the card. Now that we know who's going first, let's move on to the combat phase. Starting with the first player and proceeding clockwise, each player will take a turn revealing the first card in their command row and executing the listed command. Once all players have revealed and executed the first card in their command row, repeat this process with the second and third card in their command row. Once all 3 commands have been completed by all players, the combat phase ends. Okay, so the command phase seems pretty straightforward. Flip a card, do the thing. And since each player's command deck consists of the same 7 cards, we can all do the same 7 things. Well, there are some differences in regards to the captain's abilities, but we'll get to that a little later. Where was I? All players have the same 7 command cards, but what do these 7 cards do? Let's break it down. The forward card will move your tank forward, and how far forward it moves is indicated by these red and green lines. When you reveal a forward card, take it from the command row and place it in front of your tank so that the green line of the card is touching the green line of your tank. Now, without moving the command card, position your tank so that its red line overlaps the red line on the command card. Next, carefully slide the card out from under the tank and place it back into the command row face up. This process of using command cards as a tool to measure how far your tank moves is a common trait that you'll see throughout your command cards. Backer up does pretty much what the title suggests. It allows you to move your tank backwards in a straight line. When executing the backer up command, place the card so that the red line at the top touches the red line on the back of your tank. Then carefully position your tank so that its red line overlaps the red line on the command card. Then, just like before, slide out the command card from under the tank and place it back in the command row face up. If you reveal a Veer right or Veer left card, your tank will, well, it'll turn right or left depending on the card you revealed. When executing a Veer left or Veer right command, place the card so that its green line touches the green line on the front of your tank. Then position the tank so that its artwork lines up with the image of the tank on the command card. Once that's done, slide out the command card and place it back in the command row. The Captain's Orders card is where we shake things up a bit. You see, each Captain's Orders card does the same thing. It activates your Captain's special ability. But what each Captain's special ability does is completely different. So when you reveal a Captain's Orders command, simply perform the ability listed on the top portion of your Captain's card. Now, there are too many Captain abilities to cover in this video, but for the most part, they're all pretty self-explanatory. For any questions that you might have, there's a complete index in the rulebook with an extended explanation of how each of their abilities work. But what I can tell you is that some Captain abilities are so powerful that they'll actually damage the Captain's Orders card, and a damaged card will have to be repaired before it can be used again. But we'll cover that a little later in the video. The Again command acts as a duplicate of the last command you played. When duplicating a command that requires the card itself for measurement, simply use the previous card as your guide. The ability to copy the last card you programmed is very powerful, but there are some restrictions. Firstly, the Again command can't be the first card in your command row, because, well, if there's no card before it, then there's no command to copy. Secondly, it can't be used to duplicate a Captain's Orders. That would just be too powerful. And lastly, you cannot duplicate an unrevealed command, although you can duplicate one of the alternate commands printed on the back. I know we haven't covered the backside of these cards yet, but we will shortly. When you reveal the Fire Away command, you can turn the turret on your tank one click across one of these hash marks and fire on a single target within range. If you don't have a target in range, or simply choose not to fire, you may instead turn your turret 2 clicks instead of 1. You also have the option of not turning your turret at all if you don't want to. And just so we're clear, these turrets don't actually click. When I say click, I mean turning your turret from here between these 2 hash marks to here between these 2 hash marks. Get it? Click, click. Later in the video, we'll go over how to determine if a target is or is not within range of your tank, and what happens when you hit your target. There will come a time when the situation in the battle arena doesn't go the way you thought it would, and in some cases, this will require a last-minute change of tactics. When it comes time to reveal your command card, you always have the option to not reveal it, and instead activate one of the other two commands printed on the back of the card: Hold Up or Repair. When you choose to perform one of these alternate commands, simply rotate the card so that the title of the command is right side up. By rotating my card this way, I can activate the Repair command. When you activate Repair, you can return half of your damaged command cards, rounded up, back into your hand. By rotating my card this way, I'm activating the Hold Up command. Hold Up lets you pivot your tank in place up to 70 degrees, clockwise or counterclockwise. By bumping up the red line on the provided template with the red line on the back of your tank, it's easy to set your maximum rotation. But keep in mind that you don't have to rotate the complete 70 degrees. And if all you need is a little tweak that's clearly less than 70 degrees, you don't need to use the template at all. In addition to rotating your tank, you also have the option to rotate your turret one click. Alright, now that we got all those commands locked and loaded, let's break something. One of the primary features of the battle arena are these 36 buildings strewn throughout it, just waiting to be destroyed. Now, I know what you're thinking. What about the people inside? Well, worry not. I have it on good authority that no one is living in these buildings, and that they have all been evacuated before the event. Which is good, because these buildings go down real easy. A single shot from your tank, or simply driving through them, will reduce these buildings to rubble and reveal the goodies inside. Come to think of it, they're more like piñatas than living quarters. But unlike piñatas, what's inside isn't always a prize. Sure, there's gold, and gold is great, but there's also minefields and glue traps, and those suck. Unless, of course, it's another player running into them, in which case, not so bad. It's really all a matter of perspective. Whenever a building tile is destroyed, either by shooting it from a distance or running into it with your tank, flip the tile over to reveal the surprises hidden inside. If you reveal a tile by crushing into it with your tank, you immediately claim the reward on the other side, or in the case of a trap, suffer the penalty. So it makes sense that destroying a building from a distance might be the safer way to go. But when you shoot a building from a distance, you don't collect the reward inside until you run over it with your tank. Which means, once the reward is revealed, anyone can run over it to collect the prize. So it's up to you. Crash into buildings and guarantee you get what's inside, or shoot them from a distance and risk missing out on some sweet prizes. Let's take a look at some of the more common iconography that you'll find on these building tiles. This crush effect icon means when a tank runs into this tile, trigger the effect listed below. In this example, the tank that ran over this tile would earn 2 gold. If you shoot a tile with this shot effect icon, trigger the effect listed below that. Now, in most cases, once a tile's effect has been triggered or its reward collected, the tile is removed from the battle arena. But if the tile shows this infinity icon, the tile is never removed from the battlefield, unless otherwise stated in the tile's description. So, in the case of this bunker, once the tile is revealed, it'll remain in play for the rest of the game, which allows players to continue utilizing its effect. However, the glue trap only stays in play until the end of the round, as clearly stated in the tile's description. The last icon we're going to cover is this move off icon. If your tank ever ends its movement with any portion of it overlapping a tile with this icon, simply continue your movement in the same direction you were going until your tank is no longer overlapping that tank or tile. Those are some of the more common icons that you'll encounter while playing Boom Patrol. Now, there are quite a few things that can happen when you flip over a building tile, and we won't be going over all of them in this video, but we will be going over a few a little later. For everything we don't cover, there's a complete list of tile effects in the back of the rulebook that explains what they do. Now, before we move on, there's one last thing I wanted to mention about the tiles. If you ever reveal a tile that isn't collected, either because you shot it from a distance or revealed a permanent tile, make sure that the location and orientation of the tile remains the same. This won't be exact, so just do your best. In Boom Patrol, damage is primarily done by ramming your tank into opponents or shooting them from a distance. How much damage you deal is determined by rolling the combat dice. And just so we're clear, when the game starts, you will only be using the 2 white dice. The purple die does not come into play until later in the game, during the total Carnage rounds. So just put the purple one away for now. Before we get into all the ways that we can deal damage, it's important that you understand how to read the dice. This blank face is a miss, and rolling a miss means you deal no damage. Rolling this command card with the X in it means that you landed a hit on your target. Now, if the target you hit was a tank, the player whom the tank belongs will have to randomly discard 1 card from their hand for each of these icons you rolled. Cards discarded in this way are considered damaged and will be placed face up in that player's damaged pile. Cards in the damaged pile cannot be used until they're repaired, which we learned about earlier. When you see this icon, you've landed a critical hit. When a tank is hit with a critical result, add 1 black cube to its critical hit tracker, which is located here at the bottom of their player board. When a tank receives 3 critical hits, that tank is destroyed. We'll get to what happens when a tank is destroyed in just a little bit. But what I can tell you now is, the opponent who dealt the final blow that destroyed the tank will earn 2 medals. But if you deal damage to a tank and don't destroy it, you'll earn 1 glory point for each hit you landed. We'll discuss glory points in more detail a little later in the video. For now, let's cover all the ways that we can damage a tank. When one tank moves onto another, the moving tank is considered to be ramming the stationary tank. When this happens, the ramming player gets to perform a free attack by rolling 1 white combat die and immediately resolving any damage rolled, if any. Once the damage has been resolved, move the ramming tank off the other tank, following the same move off rules we discussed earlier. Now, if moving off one tank causes you to ram into another, repeat the same process of rolling the combat die and moving off. If rotating your tank with the hold-up command causes you to overlap another tank, it doesn't count as ramming. So if this happens, simply move your tank back until it's no longer overlapping the other tank. No combat dice are rolled because no ramming took place. That said, if performing a hold-up command causes your tank to overlap a building tile, you do in fact destroy that building. Told you they fell down easy. The other way you can damage a tank is by shooting it from a distance using the Fire Away command. When selecting a target to attack, there are 3 things you need to keep in mind. First, is the target within my firing arc? Second, is the target within range of my tank? And third, do I have line of sight on my target? If you answered yes to all of these questions, then you have a legal target and are cleared to attack. But if you answered no to even one of these questions, you do not have a legal target. Let's break it down. First, to determine your firing arc, draw 2 imaginary lines from the hash marks on either side of your turret. If my turret were here, this would be my firing arc. Now, according to my Fire Away command card, I have the option of rotating my turret 1 click in either direction before I fire, which really opens the possibilities of how much I could fit within my tank's firing arc. So in this example, These two buildings are within my current firing arc. Even though this building here has only a small portion of its tile within my arc, it's still considered a legal target. This building here is not within my current firing arc, but that can be easily changed by using my one click to rotate the turret in this direction. Now that we know that the building I want to target is within my firing arc, we need to determine if it's within range of my tank. To check if a target is within range, we're going to need our range rulers. Place the notch of the range ruler against the center hub of your turret, like this. Once that's set, angle the ruler in the direction of your target. If any portion of the object you're targeting touches the range ruler, you have range on that target, even if you just catch a little corner of it. The last thing we need to do is check line of sight. If there's nothing between you and your target, then you have a clear line of sight. But if your line of sight intersects with any portion of another object before it reaches your target, then you do not have a clear line of sight. So, now that we've determined that we do indeed have a legal target, it's time to fire away. When firing at a building, roll a single white die. Any roll resulting in a hit will destroy it. Once it's destroyed, flip it over, making sure to maintain its position and orientation on the battlefield. Tanks, on the other hand, don't go down so easy. When firing at a tank, the number of dice you roll will depend on how far away the tank is. Upon closer inspection, you'll notice that your range ruler is divided into 3 sections: close range, mid-range, and long range. If any portion of the tank you're targeting touches this point here, then you'll be performing a close range attack, which means rolling 2 white dice and applying the most devastating result. The other die can be ignored. Now, if the tank is further away and touching this mid-range point here, then you'll only roll 1 white die and apply whatever result you get. And if the tank is even further away and the best you can do is reach it with this point here, then you'll be performing a long-range attack. This means rolling 2 white dice and applying the lesser of the 2 results. In addition to taking damage, when a tank is successfully hit by an attack, it gets knocked back. The direction in which it gets knocked back depends on where it was hit. If the attacker drew a line of sight to the side of the tank it was attacking, then that tank would be pushed 1 card's width away from the attacker. To measure this distance, place the boom card corner to corner with the targeted tank so that both cards are parallel, like this. Then slide the tank so that it lines up with the boom card. If, on the other hand, the target was hit from the front or back, the tank will be pushed 1 card length away from the attacker. This is measured in the same way as the side attack. The only difference is we're using the length of the boom card instead of the width. If a tank is pushed into a building tile during this knockback process, resolve the effect of that tile the same way you would if the tank drove into it on purpose. This rule also applies to tanks, so if you're pushed into a tank, treat it as if you drove into it yourself and follow all the rules that we covered for ramming. The only difference is any additional damage dealt to the tank you got pushed into is scored by the attacker who did the pushing. So you might have done the damage, but you don't get the glory. And lastly, if a tank is ever pushed out of the battle arena boundaries, including onto a rally point, then the attacker gains 2 glory points, which you'll track here on their player board. What are glory points? We'll get to that later. A tank is destroyed when it receives 3 critical hit tokens. The opponent who assigned the 3rd and final critical hit token is awarded 2 medals. The destroyed tank is then replaced with a Wreckage card. Make sure to maintain the same position and orientation as the tank you're replacing. This Wreckage will now act as a new hazard on the field. It's important to note that when dealing the killing blow, the tank is not pushed, it's instantly destroyed. All tokens collected by the destroyed tank, gold, ammo, relic, etc., are lost and placed onto the Wreckage card, as well as any gear card that it might have had. Medals, however, are never lost. But just because your tank is now a smoldering piece of metal doesn't mean you're out of the game. If your tank is destroyed when your turn comes up, simply respawn your tank with its back end flush up against any of the 4 rally points. It doesn't have to be the same rally point you started the game at, but the area does have to be unobstructed. Then remove all critical hit tokens from your player board, and return all damaged command cards back to your hand. In addition, if you have any rattled cards in your hand, set them aside to be used later. At this point, you can reveal your next command card and continue playing as normal from your current location. Although, if you have no more command cards to reveal, then you'll just respawn your tank at the start of the next round and continue playing as normal. Any tank wreckage left in the battle arena will block line of sight when firing, which can be a nuisance. But there are 2 ways to remove tank wreckage if you're so inclined. You can crush it with your tank or shoot it from a distance. Either way, you'll earn 2 glory points for removing the wreckage. To crush wreckage, simply move onto it with your tank, then move off just as you would if you were ramming a tank. Doing so will instantly destroy the wreckage and remove it from the battle arena. All the tokens and gear that were sitting on the wreckage are claimed by the tank that did the crushing. However, if you already have a gear card and just picked up another, you're going to have to choose one of them to keep and discard the other. Now, once you've removed the wreckage and collected your goodies, roll a single white combat die and apply the result to your tank. If you want to play it safe and fire on the wreckage from a distance, simply target the wreckage as you would a functioning tank and roll a number of dice based on the range. If the roll results in a hit, the tank is destroyed and removed from the battle arena. However, when you destroy a tank like this, the Relic in gold will stay in play, but everything else that was on it is removed from the game. Lost in the explosion, I suppose. And remember, as long as the contents of the wreckage remain on the field, anyone can drive over to pick them up. So you better move quick before someone else profits from all your hard work. Throughout the game, you'll come across effects that will apply this rattled condition, as indicated by this icon. When an in-game effect causes you to be rattled, take one of these rattled cards that you set aside during the setup and add it to your hand. During your next battle plan phase, any rattled cards that you have in your hand must be programmed in place of a command card. The good news is that 2 is the maximum number of rattled cards that you can have in your hand. Let's go over an example. Let's say that we're at the beginning of the battle plan phase, and I have 1 rattled card in my hand. I would program 2 command cards and 1 rattled card, because if I have a rattled card in my hand, I have to use it. Although where I place it in the command row is completely up to me. Now, if I had 2 rattled cards in my hand, then I'd have to play both of them, which means I'm only choosing 1 command card. Yuck. Alright, so we've established that rattled cards are bad, but what do they do that makes them so bad? You see, when a rattled card is revealed in your command row, your opponent randomly draws a command card from your hand. Whatever they draw is the command that you have to execute. So you might find yourself heading in a direction that you hadn't planned on going, or firing at nothing. And just so we're clear, even though the alternate commands are illustrated on the back of your rattled cards, using these commands is not an option. One last note about rattled cards. You can't damage rattled cards. So if an opponent deals a combat card hit against you, just set any rattled cards you have in your hand aside and have them draw from whatever command cards are remaining in your hand. Then, once that's done, just return those rattled cards back to your hand. You're not getting rid of them that easy. Alright, let's talk about boundaries and what happens when we cross them. Anything that crosses the invisible lines that make up the edge of the battle arena is considered out of bounds. If an opponent forces your tank out of bounds or onto a rally point, they'll score 2 glory points. And the forced out tank will immediately respawn on any unobstructed rally point of their choice. If a player uses a command that would cause their own tank to come in contact with a rally point, movement of that tank will stop at the point of contact instead of going out of bounds. If one of the tank's corners clips a rally point, ignore it and continue the rotation. If it comes to a rest on the rally point, move off in a forward direction. And lastly, if you drive yourself out of bounds, either by accident or through the result of a rattled card, each opponent gains 2 glory points. And your tank will immediately respond on a rally point of their choosing. This is the clock tower. It sits in the center of the battle arena and blocks line of sight. The clock tower is also a permanent object with the move off effect as noted here. Now, what you might not know is that the clock tower has a little secret. You see, inside the tower is a vault filled with gold that can only be accessed once the tower is destroyed. When attacking the clock tower from a distance, the number of dice you roll is based on your range from the clock tower, just as if you were attacking a tank. Although, unlike a tank, if you want to destroy the clock tower, you're going to have to land 3 critical hits. And they have to be critical. Anything else has no effect. Each time you land a critical hit, mark it here with a black cube, and award that player with 1 glory point. The player who lands the 3rd and final critical hit against the clock tower earns a medal instead. In addition, the clock tower disc is flipped over, revealing the vault hidden inside. Once the vault is revealed, it becomes a source for gaining gold bars at the end of each round, which we'll discuss in more detail later in the video. Boom Patrol offers you a few different ways to earn medals, and they're all listed here on your player board. Destroying an enemy tank will earn you 2 medals. During the end phase, players will have the option to exchange 3 gold bars for 1 medal, but you can only do that once per round. Scoring a critical hit from a bunker will also earn you a medal because pulling that off is really hard to do. And as mentioned earlier, the player to deal the killing blow to the clock tower will also earn 1 medal. And lastly, every time you earn 5 glory points, you get 1 medal. And the best part is, any excess glory points you earn roll over toward the next medal. And keep in mind, every time you earn a medal this way, your glory cube is reset to this gray starting space, and any excess points you earned will be added on after that. All the different ways you can earn glory points are listed here. Let's review. When you damage but do not destroy a tank, earn 1 glory point for each hit you landed. As we touched on earlier, forcing a player out of bounds will earn you 2 glory. Hey, look at that, got another medal. Destroying tank wreckage will also earn you 2 glory. And lastly, for every critical hit you roll against the clock tower and don't destroy it, you earn 1 glory. After all the tanks have executed their commands, the combat phase ends and the end phase begins. First thing you're going to do during the end phase is check to see if there's any tanks within close range of the vault. Using the range ruler, measure from the edge of the vault disc to the black plastic hub of each tank's turret. If this close range point touches any portion of a tank's hub, that tank is considered to be in close range. Once you've determined which tanks are in close range to the vault, award each of those tanks 1 gold. As a bonus, the closest tank will also be awarded 1 additional gold. Now, if the vault hasn't been exposed yet, you can skip this step entirely. Next, each player will have the option to return 3 gold back to the supply in exchange for 1 medal. But each player can only do this once per round, no matter how much gold they have. So if you do have enough gold to buy another medal, you'll have to wait until the next end phase to do so. Alright, the next step is a victory check, but we only do this if we've completed all the regulation rounds. A round is considered to be regulation when the initiative card drawn at the start of the round depicts one of these colored tanks. So in our 3-player game, there would be 3 regulation rounds, 1 for each colored tank. If you still haven't played through all the regulation rounds, then at this point you would begin a new round by returning all the command cards in your command card row back to your hand. Although any rattled cards you have in your command row do not go back in your hand. Instead, they get set aside to be used later. Once that's done, program your 3 commands, reveal the next initiative card, then move on to the combat phase and continue with the rest of the round as normal. For the sake of this explanation, let's assume that we've reached the end phase and played through all 3 of our regulation rounds. At this point, if anyone has the most medals with a minimum of 6, they win. Congratulations, you've earned it. But if no one has at least 6 medals, or more than one player is tied for having 6 or more, we start a new round. Return your command row cards back to your hand, program your next 3 command cards, and reveal initiative. This is where we change things up a bit. Now that we're all through the regulation rounds, we advance to the total Carnage rounds. A total Carnage round plays just like a regulation round, with 2 minor differences. First, replace one of the white die with a purple die. So from now on, when you roll 2 dice, you'll be rolling 1 white and 1 purple. And if you ever need to roll just 1 die during a total Carnage round, you always roll the purple one. Secondly, the starting player for this round is determined by the rules listed on the total Carnage round initiative card. For example, if this was our initiative card, then the starting player would be the one with the least amount of medals. If there's a tie for least amount of medals, then those players, and only those players, move on to the second condition, which is the player with the least amount of gold goes first. If there's still a tie, then those same players move on to the final condition, which requires all tied players to roll 2 dice, and the one that rolls the most crits goes first. Alright, well, as far as learning how to play a 3-player game of Boom Patrol, you know all you need to know to start up your first game. But if you want to stick around, I'll be going over some of the tile effects that you might come across and talk about the differences for a 2-player game. One of the more common building tiles you'll come across will be the type that awards you with gold bars. When you drive over these tiles, you'll earn the amount of gold depicted here. Simply collect that gold from the supply and add it to your player board. Once that's done, remove the tile from the battle arena. When you drive over this Relic tile, remove it from the battle arena and place this Relic tile on your player board. While you have the Relic, it's worth 1 medal, which is good, but the Relic can be stolen, which is bad. If you get rammed by another player while holding the Relic goes to the player that did the ramming. It can also be stolen with the magnet tile. And remember, the Relic doesn't earn you a medal. The Relic is the medal. So if you lose the Relic, you lose the medal. If your tank touches this glue trap tile, you won't be able to move for the rest of the round. If that happens, treat all movement commands you reveal this round as fire away commands. Although the glue trap is indicated as a permanent, it is only permanent until the end of the round, at which point it's removed from the battle arena. When you drive over a gear up tile, draw a gear card from the top of the gear card deck and add it to your player board. You can only ever have 1 gear card at a time, so if you draw a second one, you'll have to choose which one to keep and discard the other. The last tile I'd like to cover is one of my favorites, the Accelerator. The Accelerator is a permanent tile that stays in play once it's revealed. If I can get a shot on the Accelerator, then I can reroute that shot from the Accelerator to another target. So, as we can see here, the Accelerator is within my firing arc, line of sight, and range. Therefore, I can shoot the Accelerator, then reroute that shot as if it originated from the Accelerator and choose a new target. And I can aim it in any direction I want. Line of sight and range is now calculated from the Accelerator tile. So, what would have been a long-range shot from my tank is now a close-range shot from the Accelerator. Alright, if you want to play a two-player game of Boom Patrol, there are a few modifications that you'll need to make. The most notable difference when playing a two-player game is that each player will be commanding two tanks acting as a team against the other player. So, when setting up for a two-player game, each player will set up their tanks at rally points closest to their side of the table. During a two-player game, initiative still determines which tank starts the round. But unlike a 3 or 4-player game, turns are not played clockwise around the table. Instead, they go back and forth across the table. It would go something like this. Alright, for this example, let's say that the two command rows at the bottom of the screen are controlled by the first player, and the two command rows at the top of the screen are controlled by the second player sitting across the table. And let's say that the yellow tank has initiative. This means that the player with the yellow tank will be the first to reveal and execute a command card for that tank. Next, the other player will take their turn, but they get to choose which of their tanks to activate. When they're done, play passes back to the first player, and they'll get to activate their second tank. Then, once again across the table to the other player to activate their second tank. Moving on to the second round of command cards, the yellow tank must again be the first tank to activate, because remember, it has initiative. When play passes over to the second player, they once again have the option of choosing between either of their two tanks. They don't have to play them in the same order that they did the last turn. Now, it's important to make sure that every tank has completed its first command before any tank moves on to the next, and so on. Another important rule to remember when playing a two-player game is that ramming into a friendly tank still causes damage. Although if you destroy a tank on your team, you do not get any medals for it. Nor do you get any glory points for damaging it. The last rule adjustment you'll need to make when playing a two-player game is that instead of requiring 6 or more medals to win, you'll need to earn 9 or more medals, collectively as a team. And that's it. I hope this video helps, and I hope you enjoy playing Boom Patrol. See you next week. Thanks for joining us. If you like this video and you want to see more, subscribe to our channel. It's the best way to keep up to date with everything we do here at Board Game Coffee. But if you want to see more right now, we got plenty of videos to choose from. And if that's not enough, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm Mark Maya, and this is Board Game Coffee. And remember, have fun, keep gaming, be social. See you next week.